I was 14. It was an average night around 9 p.m. My little cousin and I were at his house. I was babysitting while my mom and aunt were shopping, and my dad and uncle were at the movie theater. We were sitting there, and I began to feel strange. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it, so I just kept watching TV. The feeling wouldn't go away, so I got up and walked to the back door to lock it. When I walked back through the kitchen, I saw what was causing my unease. In the window stood a corpse-like man. He was just staring through the glass, fixated on my cousin. My protective instincts kicked in. I pretended I hadn't seen him and told my cousin we needed to go upstairs because our parents would be home soon. I put him to bed, knowing full well there was a man outside who wanted in. I was 125 pounds and 5'8" at the time, and I played football for my school. I went downstairs straight into the kitchen and grabbed a meat tenderizing hammer. I turned back to the window where I had seen him before. He was gone. I ran to the front door and checked the lock. Both the deadbolt and the knob were secure. I ran back upstairs with the meat tenderizer and went into my cousin's room and sat down in front of the door. He asked me what was wrong. I told him not to worry and to keep his head low. I called the police and then my dad. The cops were 30 minutes away and my dad was 45. Then I heard a window shatter, followed by the sound of heavy boots on the main floor. I told my cousin to stay calm, hide under the covers, and stay silent. I could hear the man walking around downstairs. It was horrifying. I gripped the damn meat tenderizer and waited. About 5 minutes passed before I heard the boots on the stairs. My heart was racing. My cousin's door was no more than 10 feet from the landing. I heard him opening the doors to my aunt and uncle's room, and then the bathroom. Finally, he walked back downstairs. I heard him open the door to the basement. 15 minutes later, the police arrived and burst into the house. It turned out the man had escaped from a mental hospital 1 Providence away. When I was in high school, I usually got home before everyone else in my family. My classes ended about 2 hours earlier than my younger siblings, so most afternoons I had the house completely to myself. One day I was just relaxing on my laptop when suddenly I heard. Since I was a 17-year-old girl home alone, I followed the rule my parents had drilled into me: never open the door when you're by yourself. So I ignored it, hoping it was just a solicitor who would eventually leave. Our front door had 2 small windows on either side of it. I was sitting in a spot where, from the outside, you couldn't see me, but I could clearly see anyone standing at the door. Then I saw a very large man walk up and press his face right against the window. He was trying to look inside from different angles, clearly trying to see if someone else was home. Luckily, from where he was standing, he still couldn't see me. Then he started yelling,
"Hey, open up!"
At that point, I was completely freaked out. I ran and hid in another room and immediately called my dad. He left work early and called the police on his way home. But by the time the police arrived, the man was gone. I gave them a description of what he looked like, and after they checked the area, they basically told us there wasn't much else they could do. Everything seemed fine after that, but the next morning, something really unsettling happened. My car's back windshield had been completely smashed in, and I know for a fact it was perfectly fine when the police were there the day before. We called the police again, but as far as I know, they never figured out who the guy was. Our theory was that he must have been watching the house and recognized my car sitting in the driveway. But the weirdest part is, I had never seen the man in my life, so I still had no idea why he came to my house or what he wanted. I was 16 when my parents decided to go out of town for the weekend, leaving me home alone for the first time. I was excited about the prospect of having the house to myself, no curfew, no chores, just a weekend of freedom. I lived in the typical suburban neighborhood where nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and kids played outside until the streetlights came on. My parents left early Friday morning, reminding me to be responsible and to not throw any wild parties. I promised them I'd be good and waved them off, already planning my weekend of binge watching horror movies and eating junk food. By nightfall, I was settled on the couch, popcorn in hand, enjoying the peace and quiet of having the house to myself. It was around 10 p.m. when the phone rang for the first time. I paused the movie, slightly annoyed by the interruption. Expecting it to be one of my parents checking in, I answered without even thinking twice. But when I put the receiver to my ear, there was nothing, just silence. "Hello?" I said, but no one responded. I waited for a few seconds, thinking it might be a bad connection, but the silence on the other end was almost deliberate. It felt as if someone was there, listening, but refusing to speak. After a long pause, the line went dead. I shrugged it off, thinking it was probably just a wrong number, and went back to my movie. But an hour later, the phone rang again. This time when I picked up, there was the same eerie silence. No words, no noise, just a heavy, unsettling quiet that seemed to stretch on forever. I hung up, my early excitement fading into a vague sense of unease. The calls continued throughout the night, each one more unnerving than the last. At first it was just the silence, but then I started to hear faint noises in the background. Breathing, maybe, or the rustling of fabric. The kind of sound that makes your skin crawl because you know someone's in the other end, but they're not saying a word. By midnight, I was officially freaked out. Every time the phone rang, my heart would race, but I'd hesitate before answering, hoping it was just my imagination. But it wasn't. The calls were real, and they were getting worse. The noises became more distinct, like distant whispers or the creaking of floorboards, as if the caller was moving around in a space much like mine. I started to feel paranoid, jumping at every little sound the house made. The once comforting silence of being home alone now felt oppressive, every creaking groan of the house amplified by growing fear. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that whoever was on the other end of those calls wasn't far away at all. By 2 a.m., the phone calls became restless. I was too scared to keep answering, so I let the phone ring and ring, but it wouldn't stop. I sat there on the couch, my eyes fixed on the phone as it rang out in the dark, the sound echoing through the empty house. The ringing felt like it was drilling into my skull, a constant reminder that someone was out there, or so I thought. In a moment of desperate curiosity, I decided to answer one last time. As I picked up the phone, a wave of nausea hit me. My hand trembled as I brought the receiver to my ear. But this time, there was no silence, no strange noises. Instead, I heard a soft click, followed by the unmistakable sound of a second phone hanging up. My heart dropped. I slowly lowered the phone, my mind racing. We only had one landline phone in the house, or so I believed. But the click I heard was coming from another extension. Someone else was in the house with me, using a different phone to make these calls. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The calls weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside the house. Panic surged through me as I dropped the receiver and looked around in the dark, empty rooms. My breathing quickened, and every shadow seemed to shift, every sound amplified by my fear. I bolted from the couch, grabbing my keys and my phone, and ran to the front door. My hand shook so badly, I fumbled the lock for what felt like an eternity before finally getting the door open. I didn't look back as I sprinted outside, my only thought being to get as far away from the house as possible. I ran to my neighbor's house, banging on the door and praying they'd wake up. When they finally did, I could barely get the words out, but they quickly understood something was terribly wrong. They called the police, and I waited outside with them, too scared to go back into my house. The police arrived within minutes and swept through the house, searching every room, every closet. I watched from the safety of my neighbor's front porch, my heart still pounding in my chest. After what felt like hours, the police finally emerged from the house, their faces grim. They found someone, a man, hiding in the basement, crouched in the dark with the house's second phone in his hand. He had been there the entire time, making these calls, listening to me move around the house, getting closer with each passing hour. They led him out in handcuffs, his face obscured by the shadows. I didn't recognize him, but the fact that he had been in my house for God knows how long made my skin crawl. The police told me later that he had likely broken in days ago, waiting for the right moment to terrorize me. I had been living above him, completely unaware, while he hid just below my feet. Even now, the thought of those phone calls sends chills down my spine. Knowing he was there the whole time, listening to me, waiting, is something I'll never forget. Thanks for spending time with me in the quiet room. If tonight's stories gave you chills, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more true horror stories. And remember, some stories are better left unheard. Until next time, don't listen alone.